just because we haven't got that much time, we should probably swap and talk about some other teams before.
Let's talk about Nongshim, because they're the interesting ones, because they're in second place right now. Like I alluded to, they have this new mid laner coming in halfway through the year in Gory, who's been turning a lot of heads. Dokdam has been really good. Also, Wolf, conveniently for you, you've got some more player storytelling to do, because Rich, who was the best player in Heroes of the Storm history, then moved to League of Legends and is now on this team. Is he a great top laner? No,
he's not. I think he's I'd say he's about middle of the pack right now in terms of his laning, maybe even below middle in terms of laning. Like, I can't speak that highly towards his laning phase. He makes a lot of mistakes. He plays aggressively. He plays as if he's better than the other player, no matter who it is, which I think is actually kind of a gift. I think no matter who he's up against in the top lane, like, he doesn't see the nameplate. He's just like, this is an enemy champion that I will try my best to kill, and I'm better than this, and I'll play this no matter what, sometimes to his detriment. So, usually to his detriment, actually, I'd say, when he does try to make those big plays. But he's calmed down a lot in that regard. But where Rich really excels, which is kind of, where he excelled most in Heroes of the Storm. In Heroes, he did both, but he was the best player so far and above. Like, laning phase is not as much of a thing in Heroes because you just push on the side lane as Rich. Like, he was the top player, but we also called him off laner. You were the guy who just gets experience because it's shared experience, while the rest of your team fights over objectives, and you're just trying to get as much experience as you can for your team. And then when you go to the team fights in the late game, like, it's not about being fed, because that's not how Heroes works. It's just about actually team fighting perfectly. That was the interesting thing about, when you think about Rich in Heroes, he never had advantages ever, except sometimes like a talent tier advantage if MVP Black was like stomping somebody. But he would just go into a team fight and just be better than everybody else. Because in Heroes, there are no items, there are no like inherent advantages. There's no being fed individually. Like, you have the same stats as everybody else scaled up. So he did extremely well in those moments. And then in League of Legends, oftentimes from behind on champions that can still engage and still do extremely well even with limited items, like Gnar, for example, his kit still absolutely works no matter what, even if you're behind. You're not going to be as survivable, you're not going to do as much damage, but you will get the CC, so the rest of the team can actually clean up. On champions like Gnar, on champions like Gragas, when he was playing Gragas top, his engages are so phenomenal. It's actually insane to watch how quickly he's transitioned from just being like lane bully, trying to do my thing in the top lane, to like actual great decision making in the late game, good team fighting. His laning phase, I thought, was going to be always his greatest strength, so I worried about him, but he hasn't really gotten out of how he is in lane, but his team fighting has gotten better a lot. But the story of Nongshim this season is really, I feel like, doesn't have anything to do with Rich. It has everything to do with Bay being removed and Gory coming in. Gory's playing very well. And, it is alarming, like you were saying before, how this substitute player who's always just kind of been playing fiddle to people, who's sub to Faker, for example, comes in as absolutely...
most recently on EDG.
Yeah. And he just comes in and starts dumbstringing people, solo killing Showmaker. That's been very impressive. And Peanut is like, wait, I can play the game again? I don't actually have to gank? Because Peanut, throughout all of spring season, was ganking every time he came near a lane, because he was just like, I hope I can get these players fed. I hope I can get Bay somewhere, because if I can't, then I just can't play the game. I can't do anything. I can't accomplish anything. And now that he's got Gory in the mid lane, he can play a lot more passively. He can look for the impactful moments, the important times to gank, instead of just trying to desperately hope that he carries the game. And if he doesn't, he runs it down. He's like, well, you guys are going to lose anyways. It felt like that was often the case for Peanut in spring. And then Duckdom was always great. Kellen was always pretty good. He's improved a lot. And suddenly, this is a team that I feel very comfortable, if we go to Worlds, will perform well. Could be, a team that makes top 8, maybe even top 4. We'll see how it goes. Again, we don't know what the group stages are like in Worlds, so I don't like to make those sort of like, Nongshim was a top 2 team in Worlds. That's a ridiculous thing to say. But I do feel comfortable right now with this team going to Worlds. I would not be disappointed by it. I don't feel worried about sending them like, oh, well, they're just going to flop, or they don't have that much experience yet. I think they're a team that is absolutely world class right now.
So here's my dousing this in cold water. Like, I'm very, even though I agree, like,
Gory is going to, because I could see the furrowed Monty Brown. I'm
no, it's just like, he's gonna be like, well, even though I do agree, like, Gory's had some good performances, as Thorin alluded to like an hour ago. I am concerned about Peanut's playoff/international performance, which has consistently been an issue, is that he is a noted choker. The other problem with Gory is, like, there's kind of different scenarios that we have to consider here. Yes, he's been a sub to some very good, stable mid laners, Faker and Scout, kind of most recently. And realistically, nobody ever is going to take Faker's starting position, even if they are better than Faker, purely for T1 brand reasons, right? So you have to consider that. But either we're led to believe that he has suddenly, upon returning to Korea, taken a giant leap forward in his career, or was improving dramatically while under Scout on EDG to the point where he is now a viable top-tier mid laner, when he never has been previously. Or I think the more likely conclusion is that he may be overperforming currently, but will regress to the mean eventually. Or we have to believe that Korean mid competition is not amazing right now. And if he was a sub in an LPL team and is now coming back to dominate LCK, maybe that's not a good sign for mid competition at international events from Korean players.
I can see that kind of counter argument for sure. I think everything you said makes sense, but I look at his performance and there hasn't really been a moment for Gory, whereas everyone else on Nongshim, well, I'd say everyone but Duckdom, has definitely had their highs and lows this season. Whereas I think Gory has been extremely consistent, like the most consistent player on the team by a pretty large margin, even better than Duckdom in my opinion. So much so that I don't think the argument about him being like him overperforming and then maybe he'll just regress back to like how he was and why he wasn't played over Scout, for example, is one that will come true just based on what I've seen and based on what I've commentated. But the argument that there's a lot of, I guess, variance and volatility right now in mid matchups and where the mid lane is in Korea right now is absolutely true. We went from a meta where everybody was playing control mages to very quickly everybody was playing, set mid and everyone was playing melee. Akali was coming back to now like everyone's playing Ryze and Lucian because Prio is king, and then Azir. Also Ryze can deal with Azir over here. It's like, I gotta get Prio. Prio's so important, but also like I gotta deal with all these melee champions. Those Ryze roots seem pretty good right now. So the meta has shifted like so many times it's hard to stay at a top level, but I think Gory has kind of rode the waves throughout all of those very, very well. And that makes me confident as well that no matter what meta we will get, because what World's meta is going to look like is going to be totally different from what we're looking at right now or way in the future. I think that he will perform in the future based on what I've seen from him so far. And I know that sounds like a crazy leap to make just based on such a short amount of time. But I mean, he has, I've never seen in any of my time casting in esports, a player who was a weak link on a team get replaced by somebody who became their strong link. Like, it's like turning on a light switch. It was unbelievable, the difference between him and Bae and their impact on the team.
I have to admit, I didn't watch a lot of Nongshim in spring because they were a 7-11 team that lost in the first round of playoffs. So I'm relying on you to kind of explain the big difference between the two rosters come spring, between spring and summer.
Oh, the spring roster was so reliant on pop-off performances from Rich and Peanut, and Duckdom was like, I got all the gold, but you guys either crush the team fight and we win it, or you died and I can't do anything. Duckdom was kind of like, I'm fed, I'm on Aphelios, like this is my thing. Can you guys frontline for me? And Rich is like, sorry, I died solo, like over there. Or like, sorry, I was trying to clear that ward and I got picked off, and now we just can't fight for Baron. And Duckdom's like, I'm hitting my 3-item power spike here. Like, what's going on? That was a lot of what happened for spring, but now it's just a fully upgraded team, I think, across the board.
I will say
they have that mid laner.
Like, the Rich angle is interesting because actually you made like a decent case for him there. I actually thought the Heroes of the Storm angle was a good angle because the idea was if people didn't get like the combined angle of how he plays in lane and then team fight, because he comes from a game that isn't about one person being fed like League and Dota, he just views the champion as like, what is the kit of this champion and what can I do in this moment? And obviously in his old game, well, you aren't all super far behind. Like, unless the other team's completely ahead of you, you've got a chance if you do the right thing. Which I actually think, by the way, fits top lane way more, especially as you say, if you're playing something like Gnar, which is essentially like well, it's a bruiser in, so it's like it's a half tank, half like you do some damage, but really you do it for the utility. Like you can obviously still do something even if you haven't done well in lane. Whereas if you remember when this guy was the sub on Gen G, this guy was trying to be a fucking mid laner. Listen, homie, you're not going to come from Heroes of the Storm, Babby's first MOBA, and go to Korea and just go big balls in the main role in the whole game when you aren't even familiar with carrying. Nah, that ain't going to happen. So top lane at least makes sense. That actually makes sense. So I will say, if he's doing all right, Peanut is still a good player. It's just he's just one of those players who's just some weird issue in pressure scenarios. And then if the gory guy's decent enough, you've got like the makings of a team there. The problem I have with this is like, I've seen too many splits in Korea, Wolf, where if you actually have the really quality roster, Korea really is the region, not just because of the gauntlet, where you just have to make playoffs. Like T1's done it a fucking million times. You don't have to actually be like number one in the standings to have a chance to like make the final. If you've got the really good players, as long as you make even the last spot in playoffs, you're like, we'll get together game on game. So unfortunately, I feel like this is going to be the team where they're also potentially. Wait a minute. Actually, the format's changed. Isn't playoffs now like it's not a gauntlet anymore, right?
It's not a gauntlet. It is a bracket format. 6 teams go to bracket.
Then. I will say that's better then, because I would say this is a team where in the past, by the way, if this team really did finish top 2 in the league, they would be primed to just get rocked by whoever makes it through that gauntlet. Because it'd be your first match. You're just sitting there. You haven't even played a playoff game yet, and then all of a sudden, whoever makes it there, T1, someone legit, they're just going to rock you. You've got no experience, so at least they've got that element. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's the same thing that we used to see in like some of the other playoff systems where the top 6 teams are there and the bottom 4 play in quarters and then the top 2 get buys into the semifinals.
Right, yeah, that's right, yes.
But it's not double elimination, so if Nongshim does stay in second place, they could still just get rocked in the semifinals, and then that would be it.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. They could actually get the first seed. It's not looking, impossible by any means right now that they actually are the ones who get the first seed, get to pick their opponent in the semifinals. It's a crazy world we're living in where that is actually the case, considering how poorly they performed in spring, and how they just barely got into playoffs and then got slapped. Actually, that series was a lot closer than we expected it to be. But anyways, it is a pretty big change, and for all of us, it's still kind of like hard to get used to because you do always have at the back of your mind, and there's definitely some truth to this of like, is the LCK just kind of crazy right now in a bad way? Like, is the LCK just weaker right now in general, and that's why they're able to just kind of rocket to the top by path of like least resistance because they're the one team that's doing very well right now? That's certainly a possibility. I think there are some aspects of that are absolutely true. Dom1 having a crashed bottom lane, T1 having coaching issues right now, Gen G, we'll see what happens with that one. That's the last match of the season.
Gen G at all, ever.
The one that killed my soul completely and made me wonder what LCK is supposed to be right now was when Dam1 was doing that stupid ass shit where they were almost like intentionally feeding by changing all the lanes. So like Canyon was the mid laner, and they still beat fucking Chovy's team. That was like, what even is this league anymore? Dude, if Riot can ban you for going 0-10 in a game, their whole team should have been competitive ruling for fucking 2 weeks for that. That was a disgrace. What the fuck? But they won the game, I guess, so I can't complain. Like, what the fuck? Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then. Or, be a pleb and don't.